Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Day 4 of Mail 2021. We are in the middle journey of Mail 2021 that is happening virtually right now and a few days to go until September 30, 2021. Today, we are still on part 2 of Mail under theme Crisis and Actions. And today, there are 3 panel discussions and a documentary film. So we hope all those 4 activities will guide us further to the answer at the end on the question if it is the time to redesign ASEAN as we have as the theme of Mail 2021. In the morning, we will have an interesting panel discussions on land grabbing in Southeast Asia, current situation, and the series of impacts. And in the afternoon, there will be 2 more panel discussions and the film. And the first panel discussion in the afternoon will be the indigenous people and the conflicts over forest conservation in Southeast Asia, and it's followed by panel discussions on redesign special economic zones people proposals. And to end up our day today, the documentary film on Asli the Origins. Along with the documentary film, there will be a discussion between film producers Zarisa Marikens from Malaysia and Putita Dogput from the Green News Thailand. For now, allow me to proceed to the first session of today. Is the panel discussion, land grabbing in Southeast Asia, current situation, and the series of impacts. This panel is co-organized by Equitable Cambodia, SUARAM Malaysia, and focus on the Global South, and it's going to be moderated by Mr. Vuthy from Equitable Cambodia. Mr. Vuthy, can I invite you on screen, please?
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Vuthy. So before I hand over the floor to you, please allow me to introduce you to all the audience. So Vuthy is the Executive Director of Equitable Cambodia. Equitable Cambodia is a national leader in advocating for the protection and defense of housings, lands, and natural resource rights in Cambodia. Equitable Cambodia was established in 2012 to enhance and safeguard the rights of all Cambodians from protracted land grabbing crisis that has since nearly 14% of the country's land transfers from small-scale food producer and indigenous people into the hands of agro-industrial firms. Vuthy, thank you very much for having you on with us today as the moderator and commentator. And I believe that you will be moderate this session interestingly. And before I hand over the floor to you, I would like to have a short housekeeping for all the audience that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop your question at the channel you are on. The question can be in English or in your own language. So Vuthy, over the floor to you.
Thank you, Colonel, and really a pleasure to be in this session. And thank you so much, for having us today. Easy, as you said, we were very pleased to be part of this, workshop. And today we will have very interesting speaker. Sorry. To share with us some of the experience and the works on the issue of land grabbing in their own, country and also, in the regions. So to proceed, I would like to, briefly, share the backgrounds of our 3 speakers today. So we have our first speakers, P. Pornpana. P. Pornpana is a senior Thai environment activist with experience working on land and forest for nearly 30 years. Currently, Pornpana is a director of Landwatch Thai. The organization is researching on various land issues, monitoring on land-related law and policy, campaign on the large project that affects people, such as special economic zone. Landwatch is trying to create a communication space for people and inform the public on land issue. Pornpana is currently a subcommittee on land of the Thailand Parliament. She is working on many academic writing, and her latest publication is on special economic zone and land disposition in the Mekong. So in her presentation, she will cover three aspects or areas. First, she will provide a background on the land management and ownership in Thailand at the moment, namely state land and private land. The second areas of her presentation, she will share with us the beginnings of the land grabbing in the period before 1932 region change, which caused sequestrations of peasant land from the establishment of absolute monarchy system of rights, which made land went to the hand of the federal group and elites of Thailand. Then current forms of land grabbing in both state and private. And lastly, she will present about the movements of the peasant from the past to the present. So before I proceed to the quick backgrounds of the next speakers, so each presentation will be between 20 to 25 minutes for each speakers. So next, I would like to introduce Ms. Song Danik, who is a local researcher at Equitable Cambodia. She has been working with Equitable Cambodia for the past 5 years in relation to the participatory research and advocacy work for positive change. Her research focuses on social environmental justice in Cambodia, for example, on human rights, housing, and natural resources rights. Most recently, she cooperated with the academic researcher from the Institute for Social Study, ISS, in The Hague, to write a few academic papers related to land-based climate change mitigation and adaptation. Currently, Danik is working on a joint project between Equitable Cambodia and Equitable, which features voice and experience from the community members who have faced human rights abuses due to both land conflicts and in the form of economic land concession and micro loan over indebtedness. The same, her presentation will be 20 minutes, with a short documentaries on the case that she is currently working on. My third speakers, Mr. Suresh, Balasubramaniam, sorry, I could not pronounce your last name correctly, but could I just say Mr. Suresh? So Mr. Suresh is a program coordinator in SUARAM, Malaysia, SUARAM, since September 2020. He's an activist with Party Socialist Malaysia, Malaysian Social Party since 2003. Based in Cameroon Highland and worked with many Eang OA community, indigenous people in West Malaysia Peninsula. Received many OA issues through Operation Community Service Center in Cameroon Highland. He also assists the OA for Sunday to stop the Talom Hydro Dam project, which would submerge 3,600 acres of the ancestral land. The project finally stopped in 2019. He also assists OA College to file a legal case against Thailand state government and certain other entities. The case is now at Kelantan High Court and Appeal Court at Putrajaya. He also received a few other OA issues through intervention of Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, Department of Advocacy Department. He also assists other land grabbing issues involving farmer urban settler in Cameroon Highland. So this is just a short background of our three speakers. So to start the sessions, I would like to probably ask for volunteers if one of our speakers want to speak first, or otherwise I will designate the speaker. So would one of you volunteer for your first presentation? Thank you. Thank you. So I will give the floor to Pornpana to present her case today. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yeah, the owner first. Vuthy, yeah, I would like to present in Thai.
It is fine. Thank you.
Okay, I will be share screen. Did you see? Everyone sees the
Yes.
PowerPoint? Yes. Okay, thank you, Vuthy, that you introduced my working. Vuthy ได้แนะนำไปแล้วนะคะ
คุณ Vuthy has already introduced the issues that I will be presenting, so I'm not going to repeat that. I want to start by giving the background of land management and land ownership in Thailand and the statistics that show the inequality and the issues of land ownership in Thailand, which has started from land grabbing over 100 years ago. If you divide the land use in Thailand, there are three types of land use. One is agriculture land, and then forest land, then city and other types of land. So you can see that the agricultural land is the biggest, 46.6%, and forest area is 31%, then city and other types of land use is the rest. So if you look at the types of land being stipulated by the law, there are two types only: state land and private land. There is no community land. This is because the Land Act in Thailand specifies that any land that does not belong to anyone legally, it will belong to the state. That's why the most of the land in Thailand has been declared forest land since a long time ago. So in fact, it covers 46% of total area, and this is a type of forest state land that is the biggest. So about 70% of state land has been declared preserved forest, national park, wildlife conservation area, and prohibited area for hunting. So if you look at the proportion of state land and private land according to the law, so 57%, over half, belongs to the state. This is in accordance to the law.
And an interesting statistics that show the problems for Thai farmers is that the total farmers' land is about the 23 million hectare. So then 47% it's owned by the farmers, but 52% rented land. But within this 48%, this on the left side, 41% of this portion of land is actually under mortgage. So they could lose their land if they cannot pay back the debt. And then there was some kind of land selling. No, this is the figure from 2015. So it is scary how these figures have changed because of the increasing debt burden on the farmer side and also the COVID situation. The tendency will be negative for the farmers. If you look at the private land, you can see that it's divided into 10 categories according to the owners, the wealth of the owners. So the highest earners actually own 10 to 20%. 10-20% of the highest earners own 80% of the total land, private land. So and the poorest actually altogether doesn't own even 1% of the total land. So this shows the highly concentrated land ownership. And the government has so far not been able to handle or to resolve this situation. You can see that from the highest earners and the poorest earners, there's quite far apart. They are actually 800 times different. So that was the biggest problem in Thailand. Now I want to go back to the issue of land grabbing in Thailand, which has caused so much inequity and inequality in land ownership in Thailand. We have to start with when the time of absolute monarchy, that was when the Bowring Treaty was signed by Siam with the British. That was the biggest turning point of Thailand, because the purpose was to expand rice growing areas for export. But the real change actually occurred in King Rama V era. That was when the concession was given to foreign companies to dig canals in the Rangsit Central Plain area, covering about 200,000 hectares. And the company actually was able to sell the land along the canals, but only those who can buy the land were only those who were courtiers or relatives of the King Rama V himself. That is the Rangsit Canal project, which is just outside of Bangkok. It's a very important rice growing area, and it's actually the rice bowl of Thailand. So at that time, there were farmers, local farmers growing rice there. So there were land disputes in that. And so land disputes began in that era. So, and you can see that from 1907 on, there are evidence that there have been petitions filed by so many of them by so many farmers to the king. That means that they were complained about high rent being extracted from them by the landowners. So there was a saying that these landowners were growing rice on the back of the farmers. So that was the beginning of the land grabbing by the elite of Thailand. And Thailand came out with the title deeds law in 1901. The first title deed was given out by King Rama V, and that was the beginning of land accumulation by the courtiers and the relatives of the king. And the government that at that time, you could see that because of land over concentration, another law was passed to prohibit people holding land without using it for more than 9 years. So if you leave the land vacant over 9 years, then the ownership will revert back to the state. Sorry, cannot move the slide. Just one moment, please. Can anyone help me? I'm sorry. You're going to share a screen again. Try.
Okay. มันเป็นอันเดิมโอเคขออนุญาตต่อนะคะ
Okay, now so you can see throughout the history, throughout the change of governments, the change from absolute monarchy to the constitution monarchy, which happened in 1932 when we had the first prime minister. Then we had a series of problems before the change of regime. We saw a lot of petitions by the farmers against the high rent, and they face the great financial meltdown in 1928-29. It caused a lot of problems for the farmers, and some of them actually starved to death. So that was a really big problems, and a big change happened after. We have the statistics that during the 1950s, the farmers had to pay. They were sharecroppers, and they had to pay half the owners of the land, half the produce that they made. So then the Thai government came out with a law to designate reserved forest reserve, so that meant that the farmers could not find new land any longer, and the local influential peoples were holding part of the land in the rural areas. And the first Land Act came out in 1954. It was the law that supports the issuing of title deeds to the people. The government at that time saw that the farmers had land ownership problems. So they made an attempt to try to legalize the ownership, and there was talk about justice for the farmers, about the need to ensure that the farmers could own their own land. But later on, when the government actually, there was a coup d'etat in 1959, and General Field Marshal Suresh became the dictator of Thailand. The one thing he did that was to limit the land ownership down to 50 rai. That was the earlier law. Then General Field Marshal Suresh actually allowed anyone to own any size of land. So that is the reason why the rich could buy as much land as they want without restriction. Then from then on, problems accumulated along the way until 1974. There was the peasants formed their own organization, particularly in the north, because there was a little farmland in the north because of being the mountainous area, and the rice growers had to share half their crop to the owners. So they formed a federation called the Peasants Federation of Thailand, and they were active. They were also active in collaboration with the students' movement later on too. Then in 1968, there was an important project of moving people out of the forest reserve areas. Sorry, I think. So the Peasants Federation of Thailand, there was a big change in Thailand because there were two laws were enacted: Land Reform Act and also Land Allocation Act. Then in 1977 and 78, that's a big turning point. That was when there was the attempt for industrialization in Thailand. So foreigners was allowed to own land for industrial purpose. And the first industrial estate was established in Chonburi province, and that was the beginning of real industrial estate promotion. Then when later on there are a number of laws enacted for real industrial estate establishment and permission of ownership of land for foreign investors. Then, but there was no law that could help to redistribute land to the farmers until 1982. This is also another turning point. There was some Eastern Seaboard Development Project that came out with so many laws to allow ownership by industrialists. So, and then that was, and then towards the end of the Cold War in 1989, the government had a policy of turning war, turning battlegrounds into markets. So that's how the economy was liberated, and there was a lot of investment in land buying, and that was the important result of the World Bank loan, which prompted Thailand to come out with title deeds, to give title deeds for landowners. And after that, with the title deeds can be bought and sold by anyone. So that means a lot of the land had been concentrated into golf courses and resorts. The number of laws, amendments came out about land for foreigners to rent land. That's the period of is extended from 30 years to 50 years. And then in 1997, the financial crisis that occurred in Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia, you could see that a number of land was being kind of abandoned because just left vacant. These were farmland because the owners could not pay the installment on the land purchase. So the current government, General Prayut Chan-o-cha, came out with a law that established special economic zones in 3 provinces to allow foreigners to own land in that areas, and exempting so many land laws. So that was just a summary of the evolution of land ownership and in Thailand. Then if you look at the movement of peasants or the people, it started with the establishment of the Federation of Thai Peasants. That at that time, they actually had 1.2 million members, households. It was a huge movement at that time. And they petitioned, they protested they came to protest in Bangkok to demand that the government change the law covering the rent of farmland, and to solve the farmers' land problems. And that this is the protest at actually the height of the protest was between 1974 and 79. Afterwards, many of the leaders were killed, murdered. And at that time, it was there was an uprising, the movement by the students as well. So that actually boosted the voice of the peasants quite a lot. And so the government came out with a law in response, that is the Land Reform Act. And the slogan of the Federation of Thai Peasants still remain: the land must belong to the plowholder. The law must be just. So that's a slogan of the Federation of Thai Peasants. So here were those leaders, 33 leaders were killed. Just in 1975 alone, 28 peasants were killed. since then the
Sorry.
Peasants Federation, a kind of
You have 3 more minutes, please, Han.
Okay. 5 minutes, okay?
Sure, 5 minutes then. Okay.
โอเคก็แล้วก็จุดที่ไม่ได้พูดถึงคือเรื่องของตัว
what I haven't said is about the land concessions that was actually being stopped by the peasants in the north. And that was the beginning of the movement of the peasants who were affected by the forest management law. And that was another thing. That was when forest land were being given out in concessions, and the peasants protested in 1992. That was the height of the protest against the coup makers government, and which planned to move all the people living in the forest out of the forest area. And that was stopped. Then that was because of this. Later on, another movement called the Assembly of the Poor was formed, where all the farmers and those affected by large projects gathered together, and they staged 3 months sit-in protests in Bangkok. And there was also the Northern Peasants Federation being formed by peasants who lost their land and also who were forced to move out of the forest reserve areas. Then the biggest gathering is carried out under the Land Reform Network of Thailand, which was established in 2007. That is when the movements from the north, northeast, and the south came together to propose community land management measures. And the latest move is called P-Move. The movement is called P-Move. Began in 2010. They demand community title deeds being given to communities. They want to have land banks. They want progressive taxation, progressive land taxation. So this is the ways they see to resolve the problem of land concentration in Thailand. That's the end. No land, no food, no life.
Thank you very much, Pornpana. Very, very interesting presentations. You have given us a background of the land situation in Thailand, and especially really impressed me about the movements in Thailand, and from the past until today. And I hearing you, I also really think and thought about what really happened in Cambodia. I think there's a lot of the common issues here as well. And as land is very important for the people in our region, I think this is going to be a long struggle for all of us. And in the coming session, I would like to discuss with you more detail, and I'm sure the listeners and will also have a lot of questions for you. So before I hand over to other speakers, I would like just to remind one speaker, Danik, because I heard from the speaker that we have some issue with the presentation. So I would like you to please send the new presentation to our organizer so that they can set it up. And with that, I would like to hand over the next presentation to Mr. Suresh. are you there? So and you're ready to give us the presentations?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I hand over the floor to you, and please proceed. Thank you.
Hello, hi. Good morning to all, or good afternoon, depends on where you are. So thank you to MAEW 2021 for the opportunity to speak here today on the land grabbing issue happening in ASEAN. So today I'll be representing SUARAM to talk on that issue. And it's nice to be here and also share my view among the other speakers. So I'll be doing a presentation. Let me share my screen. Okay, hope all can see my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Okay, so I'll start with my first slide. Okay, my name is Suresh, as I said before. I'm currently a program coordinator with the People Before Profit. That's the desk in SUARAM. So we are looking after basically all the issues regarding people, environment, and also indigenous people in Malaysia. So land grabbing in Malaysia is happening. I can classify that for 4 communities in Malaysia. The first one is the Orang Asli, the indigenous communities, which is living in the West Malaysia or the peninsula of Malaysia. And the second one is the land grabbing happening against the Sabah and Sarawak communities, the indigenous people living in Sabah and Sarawak, or the East Malaysia, the Borneo part of the Malaysia. We call them Pribumi in Malay language. And also the third community is the small farmers. Their lands also are being taken away, and also the urban settlers that who was in the urban area, who started to move to expand the urban areas. They are also the land that belongs to their houses or their small farms are being grabbed. But today I'll be speaking about the land grabbing happening among the Orang Asli communities in West Malaysia, the Peninsula Malaysia, because that's the community that I have been working with for the past about 20 years. So in Peninsular Malaysia, we have about 18 main tribes of Orang Asli. I'll call them OA in short form. So if you can see the peninsular map of Malaysia, those are the demographics of the 18 tribes. So that's how they are populated, you know. And so from north to the south, we have Orang Asli, and at the south we have the tribe which is seafarers. Okay, but the rest of the tribes who lives in the jungle and utilize the jungle. So the picture credit is the picture is from Malaysia Kini. It's a online news portal in Malaysia. I'll move on. Okay, so in the year of 2020 and 2021, this year, where Malaysia had about 45% days of the year under various MCOs, movement control orders, we see rampant of land grabbing happening. So this is the period where economic and all activities are frozen, you know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But then it's not for the land grabbers and also for the policymakers. Why I'm saying so? If you see at the right-hand side of my slide, there are list of land grabbing that happened in 2020 and 2021. So I think I got about 8 cases there. So in all states in Malaysia, we have Kelantan, Perak, we have Pahang, Negeri Sembilan. So land grabbing is happening, even though it's MCO in Malaysia, and we are under the pandemic. And also during that 2 years period, we see the 3 proposals put forward by the state. Okay, so the first one is to build a dam, a hydroelectric dam. Second one is a mixed development in the state of Selangor. They want to clear a forest where it's an ancestral land for the OAs, for a mixed development. And also the third one is a lanthanide mining, proposed lanthanide mining near one of the OA settlement in a state called Pahang. So that's what I'm saying, that even though it's an MCO and about half of the days we were our movements were restricted, we shouldn't indulge in economic activities, but then it's not happening for the land grabbers and policymakers. So the OA's ancestral lands are always being targeted, okay, either for logging, plantation, or mining. And also in the proposal, we see on a mixed development, okay. Okay, so these are some of the news regarding the land grabbing happening in Malaysia. So here I will start to explain why the land grabbing is happening in Malaysia. Okay, so Malaysia uses primarily a torrents title system. Okay, this is the land title system which is being adopted from Australia. So what's this torrents title system says? It says that the land registration and dealings is governed by the Register of Land Holdings, which comes under the purview of the state. Okay, so the state has an absolute power on the registration of the land and how to govern it. And this registration, the registry, is the primary source of the reference. That means everything goes back to this land registration. Okay, so it is the primary source and nothing else. And therefore, we have this concept called indefeasibility of title, where the title is the king. So the title is the absolute ownership of the land. So if someone has the title, even though the land was by generations, by history, belongs to the OA, belongs to some other community, it is not taken into consideration because the title rules. The title is indefeasibility, okay, of title, indefeatable. Yeah, the title is indefeatable. So that's the torrent system that's being used in Malaysia. So this is a book about the torrent system, and also we have articles about the indefeasibility of title regarding torrent system in Malaysia. So the torrent system was introduced to Malaya by British. Malaysia was known as Malaya before this. So British introduced that in through the 1874 Pangkor Treatment, where the British started their administration in Malaya. So what it does was it doesn't recognize the statutory law that gives the recognition for the traditional system of recognizing a land. That means the torrent system doesn't really seize the previous system used by the Malays, by the OAs on recognizing their land. Okay, this is basically one of the reason is lack of understanding. And also the second reason is because these laws were conceptualized during the British colonial period. And British, during that time, it was trying to achieve an economic growth, through exploitation, taking away lands for mining and plantations. Okay, so they need the law where they can take the land without much hassle, so to achieve an economic growth. But also these lands, these plantations, these mines were source of income for the British Empire, which was sent back to Britain. I think that's how they rebuilt Britain after the World War II, by the money that was plundered from the empire, the British Empire, everywhere else. So these lands, like Malaya, contributed in terms of the rubber plantation, contributed in terms of the tin mining to build the British Empire. So how about the Orang Aslis, OA's ancestral land rights? So the OA's land rights is not recognized by law. But saying that, I need to admit that we have the common law from good judgments regarding this OA's ancestral land. Okay, but the problem is these common laws are not transpired to a written law. Okay, so these common laws are not transferred to a written law. So therefore, the common law exists as a common law in Malaysia. So the state governments holds the right to allocate their land, and it's based on their own discretion. Okay, and Orang Asli is not consulted regarding before giving out their land to a mining company, to a plantations, or for any other development purpose. For Orang Asli, the loss of their ancestral land is a kind of loss of identity, because their life is very much related to their ancestral land. If you look at the background of my slide there, that's one of the land grabbing that happened recently this year in a place called Kuaycharoen in the state of Kelantan. So this is regarding the Orang Asli's ancestral land the land grabbing happening in the OA's ancestral land. Okay, so looking at state governments, they have the discretionary power over land and forest matters. Okay, so how do they get that? It is in the Schedule 9 of the Federal Constitution. So Federal Constitution says states have this power over land and forest, which is not a part of the federal government's law. So when there is a conflict between the OAs and the state, and the developer, after the land is being granted to the developer, so the state will try to mediate that between the OAs and the developer, and rarely the OA is favored by the state. It's always the developer which is granted with the license. That's because land is the only revenue. I mean, not to say only, but it's the main revenue for the states. They use land, they give out licenses, they give out the land clearing permits, the plantation permits, mining permits, and that's how the revenue comes into the state. And because of that, the state needs to give out the land lease, and because of that, the OA's ancestral land is affected. So this is also a flaw in the revenue system between the state and the federal. The federal government takes most of the revenue, and the state gets to hold a little of the revenue, and things like from the land matters. They get their revenues from the land matter, and therefore the state sometimes blindly give out lands, even though the lands is a OA's ancestral land. For forest reserves in Malaysia, we have forest categorized two types of forests: the protection forest and production forest. So forest reserves are not always reserves in Malaysia. That means you can still, developers can still come into the forest and develop the forest if it's a production forest. The only thing is when they develop the production forest, the regulations are tighter. That means there are more things need to be observed before you develop. And most forest reserves in Malaysia are production forests, which that means they can be developed. For an example, in the state of Kelantan, where there's a lot of OA's ancestral land disputes we observed that 90% of the reserves are production forests. So this itself shows that even though a forest is classified as forest reserves in Malaysia, and it is a part of the OA's ancestral land, it is not being guaranteed to be protected. It can still be developed. Another reason for the land grabbing happening in Malaysia among the OA's ancestral land is because of the vast power of the chief minister. In Malay, we call Menteri Besar. So the chief minister supposedly need to be guided by the National Land Code 1965. But then in most of the states where there is a conflict of OAs and the state, we observed that the chief minister is most likely to act on the short-term political gain. So the chief minister will try to reap financial rewards by giving out lands or mining or plantation lease to the party members, or to get support in the coming general elections to maintain his power as a chief minister. So that is the intention, and because of that, the OA's ancestral lands is affected. Another two posts that also has a big say when allocating lands or the cost of land grabbing in Peninsular Malaysia is the Director of Land and Mines that belongs to each state, and also the Director of State Forestry Department, which is also belongs to state. But sadly, these two posts is also heavily influenced by the chief minister. He decides who can be the directors, and also he decides the running of the officers. So it is not an independent post, even though these two posts have a big say. And also, as I said before, the OAs are not consulted in many of the land locations. That means lands are being located without being the OAs being consulted, even though they had been living there for generation or for hundreds of years. Okay, when we see the Malaysian courts, the rules, the law says that the federal and state governments have a duty to protect the land rights of the Orang Asli. But what we observed is that the legal avenue is time consuming. It can take years, and it's not easy for the OAs, the indigenous people, to get a lawyer and to financially support their court case. You know, it's a big task for them to file a case, to seek a legal avenue to address their problem. They need to get a financial support. They need to get a good lawyers, and also if they can successfully do that, the case itself takes time. And during that time-consuming legal avenue, the state still can grant license, and the developer still can go and do the land clearing, land grabbing before the court decides. So we have a Human Rights Commission which have done many good tasks in protecting the OA's ancestral land from land grabbing, and also the judiciary given some good judgments. But the local authorities, the policymakers, they do not acknowledge the OA's claim on the ancestral lands, because, as I said, the indivisibility of the title, that plays a role. For the local authorities, for the policymakers, for them, the OAs doesn't own a title to verify their ownership on their ancestral lands, and therefore they don't have the rights to on the land. And as I said before, the common law is not transpired into a written law. And the policymakers, when they are making policies, they don't really refer to the common laws. They only refer to the written laws. So companies with licenses and so on, when they get the land, and there is a conflict, there's a dispute among the companies, the land grabbing is happening, they are favored more by the authorities. For an example, the police or the forestry department. So when there is a conflict between the indigenous people and the police, and the developer, the police will side with the developer because the developer owns the title. And because of that, we see a lot of errors and detainment, harassment to the OA's rights defenders. That happened, I think, a few years ago, and keeps on happening even during the COVID period of time this year. Some OAs were arrested while defending their land in Pahang. What I feel with the current method of protecting OA's ancestral land is kind of a firefighting, where the OA's being response to a disputes over land ownership. So whenever there is a dispute, then they go in to fight for their rights. This happens after the developers obtain their license, and most of the disputes goes to the court, and it's not always won by the
Interrupt.
Yes.
We have 2 more minutes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Always, the legal battles are not always won by the OAs.
បាទការតស៊ូផ្លូវច្បាប់ជាទូទៅ OA មិនបានទទួលជ័យជំនះទេ
So
មិនដែលឈ្នះ
like
ក្តីទេ
what we feel in SUARAM is we need a long-term solution, and we have a few suggestions on that to prevent this land grabbing happening. The first one is we need a modification of the torrents title system, the kind of land allocation happening in the states in Malaysia, the Peninsula Malaysia. So what we believe is that the people who have interest in land must have legal rights and protections to ensure their continuous use or control over the land. That's not happening in the current torrent system. And also we believe there should be an oversight committee as a check and balance, and this committee should be composed of the oppositions in the state, the farming committee, the OAs, and many others who have interest. This committee should have a kind of a final decision, a final say whether a land allocation can be done or not. So with this committee, we believe that this land grabbing can be reduced. And also we believe the current national land code law, which is needs to be modified with the consultation between the state. And as I said, all these methods is a kind of a bottom-up empowerment where we empower the people, the OAs, to stop the land grabbing that's happening against their ancestral land. Okay, so we believe that we need to empower the OAs, and then while empowering the OAs, we can bring these kind of changes, the changes towards the torrents title system. And finally, 2 other things that can be also done as a long-term solution is the practice of having the common law as a written law for the policymakers. So they take into consideration of the judgments, good judgments given before, and also the major amendments which is more objective, which is more focused in the Aboriginal Peoples Act 1954. Now you have some good clauses, but it's quite subjective, and it defined separate, in different ways by the policymakers. So these are some of the long-term solutions that SUARAM thinks is possible to stop the land grabbing among the OAs in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suresh, for your very informative presentation. It is very interesting for us to hear. And again, a lot of common problems. I like to point out one of the issue that you raise is about the power of the state to control the land title program, which is really jeopardize the people that don't have access to land title, especially the indigenous people. Even though they live there for generation, then they still don't have rights over the land. And this is exactly what happened in Cambodia, and I believe in the region, because this new system of land titling come after those people, the ancestor been there for century. So I think this is something that important, that we need to look into this new practice. And you also provide a very good suggestions. One of those is to we need the modifications of the land system in Malaysia. I think we will continue our discussions in the coming sessions. So again, thank you, and so now I like probably proceed because of the time. So the next speaker is from Equitable Cambodia, Ms. Danik. Are you ready to proceed with your presentation?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay, so please, the floor is yours. And again, you have maximum 25 minutes, the same as other speakers. So please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so Bong Eang, can someone help me to share screen? Okay, so let me start. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we could hear you. Please continue.
Yeah. I'm Danik from Equitable Cambodia organization. Thank you, the organizer and moderator, for giving me a chance to share the topic related to land grabbing in Southeast Asia in May 2021. In my presentation, we'll focus the overview of microloan in Cambodia and their major investor, and voice and experience from the community member who have faced human rights abuse due to both land conflicts and micro over indebtedness, which contained in a joint report between 14 community and Equitable Cambodia and Equitable, namely right to release, as you see the report cover in this slide. So please next. I will guide you all about the microloan in Cambodia. The microfinance began in Cambodia in the early 1990 as an international development project to provide poor Cambodians. Cambodia's FI sector began to grow in early 2000s, and from 2009 onward, an explosion of foreign investment led to rapid growth that have continued for the last decade. At the start of 2019, there were more than 20 FI registered with the National Bank of Cambodia. There are some microloan figures in Cambodia that at the end of 2020, there were 2.8 million loans in Cambodia, tracked by the Cambodian Microfinance Association, totaling $11.8 billion. These include loans from registered MFI as well as the small portfolio of several Cambodian banks. Signatory to microloans are 3.8 million, which is 34.9% of adult population. The average loan size in Cambodia was around $4,280. That is high amount in the world and more than the annual income of 95% of Cambodians. Esilida portfolio collateralized is 96%. Next, please. Cambodia's largest MFI was set up with supporting and financing from International Development Agency, and some continue to be owned or financially supported by such institutions. Showing by this figure, ADB and IFC are majority lender of Esilida and Prasad. IFC also the main lender of the other largest MFI such as Hatha Kasikor, Amrit, Stapana, LOLC, AMK, Credits and Philip. Next, please. Through this figure, Esilida has got a loan $75 million from ADB and report as an active loan. Esilida has 3 active loans, approximately $549 million from IFC, and another new loan up to $100 million from IFC, with recording in pending approval. Next, please. This figure indicates that ADB gave Prasad 2 loans, approximately $71.8 million, with recording on active loan. Prasad also gets 6 loans from IFC and the other banks, approximately $70 million, while 2 of them record as active loans. Next, please. Through this figure, we can see the development financing of IFC since COVID-19 is 51%, which is half of total financing of these foreign banks, while ADB was increased only 2.7%. Next, please. This figure shows the profits of 9 largest microlenders who hold 90% of loan, which each of them record profits increasing during pandemic crisis in 2020, except Amrit record 5.2% decrease. This reckless growth have led to immense profit for MFI and their foreign lending partner, but it has led to widespread over-indebtedness, and much of this portfolio is collateralized with borrowers' land title, which have negative impacts the land tenure security of Cambodian, especially vulnerable community. Next, please. The finding from 14 community found that widespread reason for taking loan, including paying the other debt, healthcare, building a house, agriculture, and paying for a child education. The reason for taking loan to repay the other debt show that debt level in Cambodia have already reached unsustainable level, and the country continual growth in loan side can be at least partly attributed to the need to repay old loans with new loan. The reason for taking loan to access the healthcare and child education reflect that many Cambodians cannot access adequate service that are supposed to be provided by government for free. Next, please. During COVID-19, all community report that their income went down. In some cases, income dropped by up to 90%. The community said, as the income decreased, the debt increased. The option provided by bank and MFI for restructuring or delaying micro loan payment during COVID-19 are insufficient and have failed to stop coerced land sale or other abuse from occurring during the global pandemic, when many Cambodian income fell, affecting their ability to repay. The credit officer and several borrowers said restructuring was not helpful. The restructuring option often increased their total in-debt amount in the long term. Next, please. The widespread human rights issue from microloan are the debt-driven hunger, children leave school, child labor, unsafe migration, coerced land sale, and many other human rights abuse. So let's hear in the community words and experience. I accept that I must eat nothing, so only salt and prahok in order to save money, in order to save money to repay the MFI. I owe a lot and had to take 2 children out of school. My first child stopped studying at 13 years old. Second stopped at 14 years old. My 3 children stopped studying since they were 14, 15, and 16 years old in order to work as noodle seller in Phnom Penh to earn money and send money to me to repay the debt. The credit officer asked whether my husband had migrated to Thailand. If he wasn't in Thailand, they wouldn't lend me very much. If people have cow and water buffalo to sell, they can keep their land. If they don't, their land is already gone. This negative consequence of microloan debt due to the pressure from the credit officer who operate in this community, engage in aggressive lending and collection practices, pressures land sale, issue threat to borrower who were late on repayment, and encourage the use of private lender. Next, please. The community share us this message. First, the international bank that come to help, they didn't come to help Cambodia. They come to kill us. The second message is send this information to the leader of MFI so they can fix the problem. I don't want to protest against MFI. I just want them to fix the problem and to have justice. 14 communities involved this research call for immediate action to be taken by microloan provider, both MFI, bank, as well as their international investor, including State Development Bank from Europe and the United States, to investigate the scope of human rights abuse and provide relief to borrowers who have suffered from predatory lending and collection practices. Cambodian borrowers must have the right to relief and redress, or else they will continue to face debt-driven hunger, child labor, unsafe migration, coerced land sale, and many other human rights abuse. Next, please. Yeah, the last one is the slogan of the community is having land, having lives. Yeah, so my presentation is end. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would show you a short video documentary on the indebted land community speak out for right to relief, which will spend around 3 minutes more. The video speak in Khmer language and have English subtitle. We may need some help from interpreter to translate into English as well. So please help me to display the video. Eang, Eang, can someone have to display?
Yes, one moment, please.
Thank you.
We lost the land. We sell the thing that we have lost the land. We sold everything to repay the bank loans. This is very terrible for us. I don't think it reduces poverty, but it increases poverty. Some people ask their children to stop going to school, to work, to repay debts. Some people decided to go to Thailand to earn money to repay debts. Some people sell cows and buffaloes, or even paddy field land to repay debts. It is more terrible for us if we cannot pay them on time. They will confiscate our property. During COVID-19, we cannot do anything to earn a living. Our fishery products are hard to sell. The bank do not agree with our request to delay. We only have problems up our necks because we borrow more money from local lenders. Some people have motorbikes and houses. They sell them out to repay the banks or MFIs. They say when we do not borrow the money from them, they make us happy. They try to say something good to make us borrow them. Then we are indebted. First, we put our land title as collateral, and we do not have income. We don't know what to do in the future. Our food is not enough. We save the money to repay the loan. If they if the company did not come in to grab their land, they would not end up being in debt. Yeah, we have our land. We are in land conflict. We have owed them. We have children and family to support. We have people migrating. If we do not have money to repay, our property will be confiscated. If we are late in repaying them, our property will be seized. People have difficult life now. They migrate with their family. They have lost their body and life.
Okay, so I would
So,
close my presentation and return the floor to
bye.
the
Thank you, Danik. Thank you for the presentations and the video. Thank you also, for your great work to make this, happen. This is a new, I would say, a new phenomenon of the, land grabbing on top of, what really happened in Cambodia in the regions, because of the, we say, the government led policy in Cambodia. We have, since 2001, we have land law, basically encourage, foreign investor to Cambodia to invest on land or natural resources sector. For instance, we have economic land concessions. We have hydro dams. We have, even opened, we have opened beautification projects, which, privatized by the government, and, private lender come, private investor and lenders come and work together, which also cause a huge impact to the land ownerships of the people. So this is another example, how private sector could actually play a role behind land coercion, forced land sale. So, for example, the World Bank, the ADB, IFC provide loan to the local banks, and also, local microfinance. Then the microfinance involved in this, land coercion, forced land sale. So this is something that we really need to work in a long run. While, we just discussed with our other previous speakers, they talk about, the IP land rights, when, the government granted land titles, over the indigenous community land, then they could not, confront with those company or authority, because most of the time, I quote, the police or, authority side with the developer. So this is exactly, when you give absolute power to the government will decide, where to title, where, the land, or where to give land title. So if they want to develop one, particular area, they will not issue title, then leave people, in a very difficult situation. Most of the time, we see people being forced from the land and natural resources. So that's one of the issue. Another point that we also hear is that, when people try to use legal avenue, basically bring the case to court, most of the time, it's very lengthy, it's very costly, and people can't really, fight, to stop the development. Suresh said, specifically that, when people are still fighting, state already grant land to the developer, and they could develop the area before the court decide. This is the same exactly, the issue in Cambodia. People are protesting and fighting, while the developer already causing problem to the ancestor land. So this is a very much a common issue here and in our neighboring country. So I also liked what Suresh suggested, is that we need the amendment or modification of the land systems. I see not just in Malaysia, but also in our region, I would say. And a strong another suggestion, a strong body, the oversight body that basically can bring those abusers, not just the private sector but also the government accountable, because they cannot just have the absolute power. So if we have this independent oversight body, I think it could be a starting point for us to continue our fight. Example in Thailand, the land struggle, the land issue, the land grabbing happened for decades, and at the same time, it's also the movement starting from the Assembly of the Poor, the South Peasant Federations, and currently the PMU. This is an example that it's already something happens in our neighboring countries, and I would say that the regional efforts need to happen, because cross-border investment become very common. I would say in the case that Equitable Cambodia and local NGO here working to hold the the investor or corporation accountable, specifically in Thailand. Right now this is a court case happening again, Midpol, for example. So this also need a joint collaborations, people and people in the region to work together, basically to protect our land rights and our human rights. So I would just end my short summary, and I would continue with some question. I see the people raise some question for us. So if I could proceed, the first question would go to Pornpana. The question is, after the 1970 state violence, how peasant mobilization revised again in the late 1980s, especially in your case, example of the. Sorry, I hear the echo. Let me continue. So especially your case example of the north and the northeast. So that's your question. I don't know if you could type all the question. Otherwise, I could repeat it again. So that's your question.
You mean some question for me?
Right. Can I repeat again?
Some question for me? Yes. Sorry.
Okay. The question is, after the 1970 state violence, how peasants mobilization revised again in the late 1980s, especially in your case example of the north and the northeast. In the late 1980s, especially in your case example.
You want to me to more explain
right
about the movements, right?
Right. Mobilization, movement in the 80s.
Yeah. I think the movements in Thailand is very dynamic. Yeah, and the first thing I think the situation on the land grabbing is more and more more and more increase, and because the first I think the Thai government's management and on land by the law. This is the first lessons by the law. They they really sticks the law. And in another lessons, when the military comes, yeah, it's more like in case the crisis between the government officers, especially the military, with the villager. Yes, they sue the peoples more than 20,000 case in the COF regime in 7 years ago. Yeah, especially in the states land. No way out now. So the people, the movements, try to establish the models. For example, in the north of Thailand, they try to change from the catch crop to recovery the land by the tree. Yes, they mix the fruit tree and the forest in their land, and they try to show this is the models. They cooperate with the CP because that the area, the cash crop is cropped, yes, sent to the CP. They cooperations, and try to prove themselves that they can recovery of the forest if we cooperate, co-management between the governments, the private sector, and the community. This is possible, but you must use the law to them. And the second case is the people who lost the land in 20 years ago. Yeah, they go to in the private land, and get the land back from the private sector. They go to jail already, but now they try to ask the government, to announce the new law is the land banks, to buy the land from the private sector, and reform the land to them. Yes, they want to own, pay the money, allow the 20 years lands, and get it to owner by the land. This is the second model. The third model happen in the southern of Thailand. They go to in the palm oil plantations that that's the time to lend with the loyal forestry already, but no get back the land to the loyal forestry. They no land. They go to in the palm oil area and and reform the land by themselves. Yes, and but that the area are already covered by the for land reform by the office land reform, and when they ask the land reform office, go to allocate the land for them. This is the third model. Yeah, it's and another model is try to prove themselves to management the lands by themselves. This is the dynamics of the movements of the people who or land issue who try to solve the problems. Yeah. Another is about the land tax. The land tax, you know. Yes, this is the fourth example. Yeah, Vuthy. This is the answer.
Thank you, Pipana, for the additional explanation and answer. I will proceed with the next question. This question for Suresh. If you could answer, this question from our audience. So the question is how the government addresses the issue of colonial land occupation with regard to the land justice in Malaysia, and in what avenue? I hope you can repeat my question.
Yeah, can you repeat the question again?
Okay, the question how government addresses the issue of colonial land occupation.
Colonial land, is it? Yeah.
Colonial land occupation with regard to the land justice in Malaysia, and in what avenue?
Okay. In Malaysia, we have this the law that says whichever land doesn't have a title, it belongs to the state. So that means any land without a title belongs to the state. And therefore, when there is no colonial land, but then the land that's without title belongs to the state, and therefore when there is a request for any vacant land or any forest or any other part of the state, it goes to the state, and state only looks at it in a very narrow view. In case of this ancestral land, OA's ancestral land, what I mean by the narrow view is that the state recognizes the OA's development department, that is a federal government's department, as the sole organization in charge of this OAs and their land. And the state, when there is an application on the land that the OAs had been staying for generations, the state refers to the department. And this department, most of the time, the feedback is not the correct feedback. This OA development department doesn't really go to the OA, doesn't really go to the ground to check where do they occupy, where the settlement is, where is the ancestral land is, what is the use of the ancestral land to the settlement, and so on. And most of the time, the approval is given by the OA's development department straight to the state without considering the communities which is living there. Okay, and once this approval is given to the state considers the land can be given because the department that's supposed to look after the OAs has given the approval. Okay, now I can say maybe about last 10-20 years, I observed that the OA's development department did improved a lot in terms of approval giving land, the OA's ancestral land, to the state. I can see many times it has been rejected by the OA's development department. That means there is a progress. The department is recognizing the ancestral land. But what happens is when the OA's development department don't give an approval, the state still bulldoze or move forward, giving out, allocating the land to the developers. Because as I said in my presentation, the chief minister, the director of land and mines, the director of forestry department has the final say. And these people has vested power, a lot of power to decide this, even though some departments says no. Even though some departments say no, they can just still move forward. And that what happens now. Even so if the state is decided on allocating the lands, whether it's a forest or it's a whatever the land is that's not being occupied by anyone, so it thinks it belongs to them, and they have the discretion to release the land to the developers they are interested. That's what's happening within the state at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Suresh. Thank you for your answer. I now have 2 more questions from the audience to Danik. First question, Danik, why human rights-based approach to development have never been integrated to this microfinance lender? Can you please answer to this question before I start with the second one? Danik, are you there?
Sorry, Bong, can you repeat the question again?
Okay, so the question is why human rights-based approach to development have never been integrated to this microfinance lender? Talking about, ADB, IFC, the microfinance lenders, or, or if you aware of any, human rights approach to, the policy of the microfinance institution in Cambodia, you could also add to this.
I think the question is look like maybe the someone who asked this question never know about the human rights in related to MFI. For my opinion and understanding, even MFI sector, especially IFC and IDB, they have like a human rights policy in their in business policy. That's why all microfinance institutions have to follow their policy before they get loan from this foreign lender such IFC and IDBs. For my understanding related to IFC, they have a policy related to the human rights, such as like no hunger, related to the prevents the victim from livelihoods, and the other like land sales, cost land sale. Yeah, and the other human rights policies. So I would say that in microfinance sector, they have like a human rights policy, and all microfinance sector have to respect this policy before they get the loan from the foreigners in lenders.
So you're saying that both, the microfinance lenders in Cambodia, or the investor like ADB and IFC, they have the human right policy to their investment and business. But the problem is probably I thought that the practice on the ground is an opposite.
yeah, in practice, yeah, we found that it really abuse on the human rights in the microloan sector. However, yeah, based on our research, we would say the problem related FI affect to the community who suffer from the microloans, and so yeah, we hope all relevant sectors such as the microloans institution themselves and the other like foreign loan provider such as IFC, ADB as well to know about these affected that come from their providing loans to the private institution in Cambodia.
Okay, thank you, Danik. So let me proceed with the second question for you. So the second question is how your research contribute to the poor family who are indebted. The person said, I know there are a lot of cases that indebted family always forced by microfinance to sell their property for paying back the loan. So how is your research contribute to solving this problem?
Yep, thank you for the question. After our research release, we conduct the research finding dissemination to the community representative and also some victims from the MFI, and we also provide the capacity building to the community representative and some victim about how MFI affects to their community, and also the right of indebtor to prevent them when they face less repayment or face any threat from the credit officer or any MFI officer. And the indebtor and victim also can also contact EC and legal staff to get some law assistance or any technical advice for them if they got any threat or any problem with the credit officer related to their microloan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and after we publish like printing the report, we will share to our community that we working with, and also the other the victim who are faced with the microfinance, and we hope that this report will be reached to them, and through the community representative that we provide them the capacity, they may share their understanding related the microloan and their affected and also the right of the indebtor to their community member. And yeah, the other strategy we will discuss more because it's related to the confidential of what we're working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danik. I think now we come to the end. We got some more minutes, but I would suggest that our speakers probably provide a last suggestion or recommendations. So you will have like 2 minutes each to share your last thought and recommendation. Thank you. I would proceed with Suresh and then the Pornpana, and then lastly to Danik.
Thank you. Okay, so as I stated in my presentation, land grabbing is happening among a few communities in Malaysia, in Peninsular Malaysia, and also on the East Malaysia. So we have the indigenous people on the West and East Malaysia. We have the farmers community. We have the urban settlers. So I feel to fight against the land grabbing, to stand up and have a victory against this issue is something that you need to come together for all these communities. You know, I think you can do it alone. Definitely you can, but then it's good to have a network between these communities, and for that these communities can network themselves, and for that they can ask the state, each state in Malaysia, to change some part of their National Land Code Act so that they can accommodate the voice from the bottom, from the people. So it's not a struggle by the community, each community itself. It should be a struggle of different communities coming together to stop the land grabbing. And these communities, when empowered, they should form a network, and they should ask each state to change the National Land Code so it includes a committee where this committee has a final say on allocation of land or land grabbing that's going to happen for the community. So that's what I would suggest, a way forward for the to stop the land grabbing that's happening in Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Pana, please, maybe your last suggestion and thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Vuthy. It's so difficult and suffer, I think, for the villages in each country from the land situations. Yeah, I think so. We talked about it more than 10 years ago. Yeah, between country in Southeast Asia and in Mekong regions. Yeah, I think it's we I think so. In the past time, or in 2 years ago, we have the conference and we talk together and we share the experience together. But I think should we have a new things to talk and to share for the challenge issue on land. What is the challenge that we try to discussions. Yes, I think for the next for the MAL conference, I think should we plan the process. Yes, for example, on the land issue, I hope if we can we have the process to share okay, the situation and what the challenge that we meet in each country, and what the challenge between us or between the country. Yes, I think that is when we have the conference that we can talk in shape issue from the in the land issue. I think what the challenge, I think should be I suggest to the organizer and with among us. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Vuthy.
And for the suggestion, I think the organizer note it down, and we will have this discussions in the next mail. So Danik, I think our time is out. I don't know if you have last thought or suggestion before I hand over to the organizer.
Thank you. I have a little bit suggestion from the community, so I would take this chance to share the community suggestion to the relevant stakeholder.
Please go ahead in 1 minute, Danik.
Yeah. I would bring the suggestion of the in-depth land community for 5 major change to take place to relevant stakeholders such as MFI's institution in Cambodia and their foreign investor to return all land title that are currently held as collateral for the microloans. Independent investigation into the scale of human rights abuse caused by microloan in Cambodia, their relief and proper compensation for borrowers who suffer human rights abuse as the result of predatory microloan. Effective enforcement of the law in order to stop cursed land sale, prevents illegal pressure from MFI, credit officer and authority, and hold the use of fee that leave the effective interest rate higher than the legal maximum 18%, lower the interest rate on microloan and more flexible restructuring option for distressed borrower, including temporary suspend of the principal and interest accrual. Without this right to relief, borrower will continue to face debt-driven hunger, child labor, and self-migration, cost land sale, and the other human rights abuse. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Danik, for the last thought. And again, I think, we ran out of time. Jerry Cannell is already in here, but before we end the session, I would like to thank you all the speakers for your contribution, your insightful, contribution, input to the sessions. We really appreciate your time and input. I hope, we will have the next sessions, and we would be very, very happy to have you all again. So I would end my facilitations now and hand over to Jerry Cannell for further process. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vuthy, for moderating this panel, and thank you to all panelists for updating us situation of land grabbing in your country and also the change of impacts. And it was great to learn what have you done for your community, and really appreciate this. And coming to the lunch break, we have early lunch break today, and we will resume at 12:30 Bangkok, Thailand time. And there are 2 more panel discussions in the afternoon and a documentary as well. So don't miss it, and see you again after lunch.